Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Map New Routes, Programmatic Tactics for Travel Marketers. My name is Arda. I'm part of the marketing team here at StackAdapt. And with that, I would like to hand it over to our presenters to get us started.
Hello everyone, how are you doing? My name is Neil Robinson. I've been with StackAdapt for just over 18 months now. I come from about 20 odd years of digital ad tech experience. Majority of that time has been within performance marketing, starting off in the old networks and moved my way through to the DSP. So travel and particularly ROI focus is something that I'm quite passionate about. And I'll let Yiha introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So my name is Yahya, and I am a director in the solutions team within StackAdapt. I've been with StackAdapt for 2 years, and my focus is on building new solutions that will help marketers reach the right audiences and also measure and attribute the success of their campaigns to the spend that they spend on our platform.
Cool, thank you very much. So I mean, first of all, I think there's a lot of people on here today that a lot of our clients have been working with us quite a while, who probably know us quite well. But I know there's also quite a few people on here that have never worked with us. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, I thought best give you a bit of an overview of who StackAdapt are and what we do. Very simply, we're a multi-channel DSP that run across audio, connected TV, display, digital out of home, in-game, native, and video. Our platform is one of the most progressive workplaces in machine learning and AI, where it meets cutting user experiences. Media planners execute and manage data-driven campaigns across all devices, inventory, or publisher partners. Now, obviously, we've got quite a mix of brands and agencies on this webinar, so please bear in mind a lot of the information is quite top line. If there's anything specific you want, as Arda said, pop it into the question box and we'll answer it at the end. If we can't answer it now, we'll definitely get back to you individually and answer that as well. So without further ado, let's go through the agenda. I'm going to kick off with the webinar talking to you about some of the trends across the travel industry, and then jump into some of the top tactics and best practices for travel brands. And then Yahya is going to talk you through how to reach the right audiences and the measurement of the ad performance before we wrap up and answer those questions with you. So without any further ado, let's get started on the trends of the travel industry. This slide looks at ad spend and its growth over the last 5 years. As expected, there is a big spike after the pandemic, but since then, the downturn in the economy, we've seen double-digit growth year on year, with the same expected in 2024. So really good news for hopefully everybody on this call. But where's everyone going? What's everyone doing? There's a few stats for you now. In 2023, Q3, from July to September, UK residents made up 28.3 million trips abroad. This was an increase of almost 10% compared to the same period in 2022, when 25 million trips were made. Europe will be the #1 destination for global travellers, with a 55% market share in 2024, which is actually 4% higher than pre-pandemic. Again, if we look at 2024, global travel, it's predicted that 5 out of the 10 most visited places will be in Europe. 6 if we count Turkey. I googled it a number of times and couldn't actually find a definite answer if it was or wasn't Europe. If we look at Euromonitor's index, Paris is the most visited city in the world. But focusing close to home for anyone that's looking after UK-based travel, in the UK alone, over 15 million airline passengers are expected to arrive in London in the next 90 days, with a 36% rise in travellers from North America. So we're set to, again, surpass pre-pandemic rates from there. So that's where everyone's going. But obviously, the shifts in spend and what we're doing is changing quite heavily as well, as time progresses. Sustainability is obviously top of everybody's mind. Inflation easing, or isn't it? The survey is definitely showing sentiment towards improving spending. 4% on average are looking to spend more across sustainability than they were last year. 31% respondents stated that their travel plans were influenced by the impact on the environment. In particular, millennials and households with an income over 80k are most likely to spend on sustainable goods and services. The shift from luxury goods to luxury travel, I'm sure you've all read about. The pandemic obviously resulted in a boom for many luxury goods businesses. They saw record profits, from high earners who were at home, not much to do, spending on home and fashion products. However, since the pandemic, the trends declined. Many luxury goods businesses reported drop in demand as well. It looks also from our stats that the hotels, travel and tourism industries have benefited from that downturn, as you'd probably expect. High-income households reduced their spend on the consumption of material goods, and they're now shifting their preferences to experiential services such as travel. So, for example, high-income households plan to increase their spending on short-term breaks has risen from 3% to 10% this year. The UK's luxury hotel sector enjoyed a remarkable recovery in 2023, with the average room rate reaching £327, which is a 35% increase from the pre-COVID levels of £243. And finally, longer stays are becoming more increasingly common. This is due to the cost of airfares going up and up, so travellers are wanting to get longer holidays so they can get better value for money when they're going there. It's also a more sustainable way of travelling, and it avoids those jam-packed schedules that most people see. So what are travellers actually craving this year? What are they really wanting to get out of their trips? Well, first of all, 60% of travellers prioritising rest and recharge for their trips. The Italians are actually leading the pack on this, with 76% of them wanting that. The next one definitely applies to my mother. 62% plan to keep an eye out for travel packs and deals to be able to afford luxury travel. 50% want to travel to destinations where the cost of living is lower than where they live, and 54% are likely to pay for accommodation upgrades. When we look at the mystery trips, as it were, 52% of travellers want to book trips to destinations that remain a mystery until they arrive. Seeking an escape from the everyday, 56% are inclined to go off the beaten path, and 69% prefer travelling with loose plans so they can adjust the itinerary for what feels good for them in that moment. Authenticity is also key for a lot of people. 47% are eager to connect with locals in less travelled areas, with 44% venturing into less touristy spots. So the next slide is all about the important factors to people when they're booking trips. And to me, it's all about what your messaging should sort of reflect and where you should be going. Price and refunds are clearly the most important thing for leisure travellers. But it's also important to note that for business travellers, they aren't so focused on one thing, more on a bit of everything across the board. So one thing I would say is make sure when you build your strategy, if you're dipping into both pools, is to look at leisure travellers and business travellers. Setting up travel campaigns in our platform is super easy to do, and it's super easy to be able to target both sets. Also with creative as well, creative messaging would need to be different. We've got a fantastic creative services, creative studio team here, who basically we can build you two variations of each creative for you. So you can have a leisure traveller one and a business traveller one. I'll talk a little bit more about our B2B, our creative services solution later. And yeah, we'll talk around the strategies to be able to target both business and leisure travellers. So this section now, I'll talk about the channel strategies and how you can best target, do your targeting for travel brands. One thing I want to sort of focus on quite heavily in here is digital out of home. It's probably one of the most underused channels we see from travel advertisers, but at the same time, it's one that's given some of our clients their best results. So it seems that there could be a trick being missed somewhere out there, and hopefully this will give you all a bit of a head start over your competitors that aren't on this call. So multi-channel, a key to successful campaigns. We know that. I mean, I think when you look at all the different channels that we offer you, they all play their individual role. Digital out of home, for example, is great for casting a wide net and reaching a broad audience. Audio can be really highly targeted ads. You can really capture the right traveller profile where listeners are, very engaged, non-distracted and emotionally charged, for example. Connected TV and video are great for telling stories and mass communication about promotions or events or a featured destination. Native is great for engagement and information. Blogs are a great way also to inform customers about different product destination highlights and hotel reviews. And display, we sort of see as the workhorse. You use it to lift performance or other channels, and it's it's best used with that call to action of buy now or purchase a ticket, reserve today, those types of things. But I think the thing that we always sort of try to look at is bringing them together. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And I definitely think when you can do this all in one platform, it makes your life a lot easier. So think about optimizing up and down the funnel, not just down to the end results. And by this, I mean, look at what geos are working for your best display conversions, and then use these insights in the upper funnel to move your tactics around. So for example, if you see some really strong performance in Yorkshire and you're running digital at home all over the country, maybe move it away from somewhere that isn't working and spend more money in digital at home. And by doing it all in one platform, it's going to be a lot easier for you to shift those budgets around and remain nimble. As we know, all these things help contribute to a better performing campaign. So I said I was going to focus on digital at home. Probably teaching a lot of you how to suck eggs, and you know all about it already. But just to talk about the ways you can target through digital at home. Geography, really important, countrywide or neighborhood, be as specific or as wide as you need to be within reason. We can target time of day of week, obviously, and weather conditions, also really important. We can target off the back of those. So for example, at the moment I'm running a campaign for an indoor tourist attraction, which increases its spend when it rains. Obviously, if you're in the UK, very important for you. And then venue types as well: shopping malls, high streets, bus stops, restaurants, billboards, gyms, loads of different places. Think contextually and how people's brains are tweaking when they're in these different environments, as well as dwell time as well. So that's a little bit about digital out of home. But as far as sort of building a strategy for them, the points that I would recommend to look at a location research, as I mentioned just now. The best locations for reaching your target audience. Where are they? Are they gym? Are they commuting? Are they mall shoppers, etc., etc.? Define the creative format. Look at between static and video. What's going to work best in that time slot? If it's somewhere you're going to walk past quickly, then static's obviously going to be great. If it's somewhere there's long dwell time, then video, you can show a little bit more richer content as well. And also remember, there are restrictions to some of these things for digital out of home. For example, no moving ads next to moving traffic, that type of thing as well. Look at your messaging. Consider the context in which your ads appear and use that to personalize messaging. We're not always in the same mindset. Gyms, airports, supermarkets, wherever it would be, we're thinking differently. So think about how to best place that creative messaging depending on where the ads are going to place. Again, we've got a creative strategy team here. If you need any help or any insights about what works best, please get in touch with them. They'll be more than happy to help out for you as well. Create brand recognition. It's pretty quite a straightforward one, which I'm pretty sure everyone knows already. But make sure your brand name or logo is present throughout the ad. We've all walked past those ads in the past and go, who's that for? What's that advertising? What's their product? Make sure that isn't you, particularly for digital out of home. Diversify your creatives. Digital out of home formats are great when they're personalized, when there's competitions in there, new messages, maybe games, something like that. And I'll talk about that in a case study in a second. And then obviously sort of measure and optimize, implement tracking mechanisms such as QR codes, scan redemption rates locally to sort of gauge performance of these, and use the insights you're getting from the rest of the funnel to optimize your campaigns as well for full effectiveness. Okay. Next one is creative best practices. So we're looking around, we've built the strategy, now you need to build the ads. As I say, we've got a great creative studio team here, very cheap rates and very quick to turn around as well. Great team who will offer a lot of advice. But looking at the actual ads yourself, these are the things that we would sort of suggest for you. First of all, for digital out of home, avoid white backgrounds. LED technology, white doesn't carry the same pop vibrancy that you might well be looking for. Fonts and logos in big locations, make sure it's large enough to pass accessibility tests. People that are squinting at it from a long way off, it's not going to be helpful for them at all. Time and color schemes, and this is quite interesting. Obviously, rich, bold colors, they actually work better during the daytime, whereas pastel colors work better at night. So again, having two types of creative that work between day and night could really help your performance as well. Daytime into consideration, looking at what time you're going to be doing, how your creative is going to be run out as well. Avoid those classic click to call to action type adverts. You know, it's digital at home. It can be very confusing if you have to do something. Make it very clear and to the point. And as these examples on the screen are showing now, choose graphic elements that have got a strong focal point. Really busy photos don't work well. People don't know what they're looking at or where they're going to from there. So that's a really important one as well. As I mentioned, there's a case study I'd like to take you through. This is actually one we did with an agency called Digital Willow for the Isle of Man. Previously, they'd only ever run search campaigns with us. Well, sorry, they'd only ever previously run search campaigns. They'd sort of reached a plateau in their performance, and they wanted to speak about how they could drive more interaction at a lower CPA. So we worked with Digital Willow to build out a multi-channel campaign that led with digital at home at airports and in cities in the UK where flights were available to the Isle of Man. Our creative studio built out a number of variations, as you can see here. Extraordinarily is less than an hour away. This one was actually for Edinburgh. We had one 30 minutes away, which was for Liverpool, and so on and so on. So lots of different messaging, very personalized to that location that you were in. It was then supported with display advertising around the same locations with the same messaging. Plus, we also ran a more general campaign throughout the UK to drum up information, drum up interaction. Sorry. The results were fantastic, as you can sort of see. Based compared to the previous year, where it was purely a search campaign, there was 236% increase in clicks. There was a 66% lower CPA than the core search campaign as well. And a really nice stat here, 11% higher CTR for geo-targeted ads versus the rest of the country where general ads were shown. So that's been a huge success. But they've actually come back and worked with us quite a few times again. And since this has been run, we've actually run more activity where we're seeing a higher click-through rate for display activities where users have seen a digital out-of-home ad, and then we've retargeted them again with a display ad. And those stats are looking between 5 and 17%, depending on location. So really nice case study there of showing how you can use digital out-of-home as a core sort of factor within your campaign, not just for display, but also for search as well. And now I'm going to pass over to Yaha to talk you through how to reach the right audiences.
Yeah, thank you so much, Neil. And before I dive into the audience section, just wanted to quickly recap on what Neil presented. So I think the number one thing that we can see from this is travel is booming. Europe is a leading market with the top destinations by visits. Neil also presented some of the channel tactics and strategies, and also some of the factors that influence the traveler's decision. So one thing that I wanted to do in the next section is to deep dive into the funnel, try to understand a little bit more about those decisions, and also the traveler's journey from when they dream about traveling to actually when they end up visiting the destination, and how we can reach them at those different stages. So in the next slide, so Neil, if you can move on to the next slide. In the next slide, this is the typical generalized travel funnel. At the top of the funnel, a traveler would start by dreaming or just thinking about traveling to a destination. And in that stage, they consume a lot of content to kind of help them make their decision on the destination. In the next stage, once they decide on the destination that they want to visit, they start the planning stage. So in the planning stage, they search about different things such as lodging, hotels, airlines, activities, attractions, and they end up making some sort of a plan where they want to travel a certain date, they want to visit certain attractions, they will stay at a specific hotel, and they probably travel at one or like 2 different options of airlines. And once that plan is done, they end up booking, and the booking typically happens booking first the airlines, and then booking the lodging, and then booking some of the attractions before they travel, and the others while they're at the destination. After the booking stage, and from a destination perspective, the end outcome or the end like conversion metric is actually visitation. And for some destinations, they also want to measure the spending of those travelers at the destination, so they can understand the value of each traveler. One thing I wanted to touch on here, and it's important to understand like the targeting tactics, is the signal. what is a travel intent signal? So a travel intent signal is a way for us to understand that there is a traveler who is likely going to travel within a certain time window. This traveler has a specific origin market and a desired destination. So those are the three attributes that define an intent signal: the origin market, the destination, and the timestamp, because the timestamp also helps us understand where they are at this different journey that I just presented. And then the way this signal is exhibited or shown online, typically through three things. So one is browsing. When someone browses specific content about travel, this is an indication that they intend to travel potentially within a certain look back window. When they search for specific travel related topics and travel related bookings, then that's another stronger signal for us to understand that potentially someone who's searching for a travel, let's say for a lodging in the UK, is going to travel within the next, let's say, 15 to 30 days. So that's the second type of signal. And the third type of signal, and the strongest signal, is the booking signal. So if we can identify a booking at any of the travel different activities, then we also potentially know with more more deterministically that someone intends to travel. So this is the travel signal. And in addition to the travel signal, and what makes the travel signal even more powerful, is understanding the attributes that define this traveler. So Neil presented the different attributes that define the decision making, and those are the same attributes that also help us to understand the traveler profile, such as the type of traveler. So if someone is a leisure traveler, someone is a family traveler, someone is a business traveler. Another thing is the interests of that traveler. Some people are interested in dining, some people are interested in nature, and also the potential value of the traveler. And that can be understood through their previous behavior when they travel. So how much they spend, how frequently they travel, and what's their loyalty program status, for example. So this is a summary of how we understand travel intent and how we try to use it in the context of that funnel. At the top stage, the signal is the browsing signal. So we're trying to use contextual targeting tactics to really hone in and identify those travelers who are consuming this content at the top of the funnel. And then to Neil's point, we want to employ specific strategies and tactics, including creative messaging, to build awareness. At the second stage of the funnel and the third stage, they're doing actions online. So we're trying to understand and using different types of partners, which I'll jump in the next section, try to understand what those actions are, what are those intent signals, and how do we understand their stage in the funnel, and accordingly we will develop the tactics and strategies to reach those travelers. So if we can move on to the next slide. One of our strongest offerings in Europe is using the mobile signals through our partner Start.io to reach travelers based on the intent signals that they show. And the three key themes that we focus on is, number one, travel intent. So using the behavior of different users on the mobile apps that they use, we can understand the travel intent. So if someone searches, let's say, for a specific keyword within a travel app, we can map this back to a certain intent and try to understand the origin market, the destination, and the timestamp. And then that way we understand that this person is in market to travel. The second type of theme, or the second type of criteria, is the traveler behavior. So that goes to the segmentation that I just spoke about. So how do we understand through the behavior of those travelers on those apps, their typical profiles? And that allows us to actually provide a more targeted solution and also more targeted strategies and tactics to reach those travelers. And finally, how do we use this behavior to segment traveler, and also importantly understand the value of the traveler? So that's an important criteria if we're talking about optimizing and maximizing the return on ad spend. And if that's measured through, at the very, very bottom of the funnel, how travelers actually spend at the destination, it is important for us to understand who are our high value travelers and reach those travelers through the different tactics that we can employ. So in the next slide, I think this is more to just explain the methodology and the scale that we have through our partner. So Store.io is one of the major SDK providers with 25 billion SDK downloads and more than 500,000 mobile applications. They have very large scale in terms of the users that they can reach or they can actually provide us for targeting purposes. So more than 2.4 billion monthly active users. And then their data itself is extremely rich. So in addition to travel signals, we also have location events, other data signals, and active Wi-Fi signals as well. So that's a very strong kind of data set that allows us to, number one, identify the intent signal, and number two, segment travelers accordingly. And then as you can see in the bottom section of this slide, this is just an example of the travel apps that they have access to through their SDK, which again gives us a very good ability to identify the signal through the different touch points that travelers have on those apps, and then use this data to target travelers based on the intent that they show and also based on the segments or the profiles that we can infer from this data. From a brand perspective, what's important is, number one, to understand what is the type of traveler that we're trying to reach. So typically for some destinations, they are targeting, let's say, adventure travelers. They are targeting leisure travelers. In other destinations, they're targeting luxury travelers. So being able to understand what those attributes are for the travelers, and number two, understand for those travelers what are their origin markets. So let's say we are Italy and we're trying to run a campaign to have people visit a specific city in Italy. It's important to understand typically where the travelers come from. And that way, using our data, we can identify travelers with the same origin markets, with the same profiles. And then whoever shows intent to travel within a specific look back window, we can target those travelers. And that way we can maximize their return on the ad spend. So that's just a summary of some of the tactics and our thinking behind reaching travelers. In the next section, and also thinking about our ability to reach those travelers, how do we prove that we actually reach those travelers? I think Neil presented a very good case study on the Isle of Man and some of the KPIs and metrics that we were able to drive. And it's extremely important to understand click-through rates, impressions, conversions. But when it comes to travel, there's more to measurement and attribution than just those specific and traditional KPIs. So in this section, I'll walk you through some of those additional targeting and attribution strategies and solutions that you can employ. So going back to the funnel on the next slide, again, it's the same journey that the traveler goes through. In this case, we want to understand what to measure. I think Neil presented the decisions, and then we try to map those decisions on the funnel to understand when travelers consume content and browse, when travelers plan, when travelers make a decision and book, and then when travelers visit. How do we measure this? So one theme in general is the change in sentiment. So if we're trying to run a campaign at the top of the funnel to try to convince people to travel to a certain destination, they're not doing any convergent action. There's just a change in sentiment. So we're trying to understand before and after the campaign, were we successful in driving a lift in that sentiment? And that theme also carries through in the next two stages of the funnel. We want to see if we were able to convince people in the planning stage to make a decision to consider, let's say, a certain airline, a certain lodging option, or even a certain attraction or event. And then at the bottom of the funnel, again, it's just intent. It's not a conversion action. We're trying to understand if there is a purchase intent or a booking intent that we were able to drive through our campaign. That's one theme of measurement. In addition to that, another theme or another measurement solution is being able to attribute the travel actions back to the campaign. And those travel actions, the three travel action types that I presented, so browsing, booking, and searching, we want to understand if our campaigns were successful in increasing the browsing behavior of users as it relates to, let's say, the destination, if it increased the searches that they performed, to actually also like consider that destination if it ultimately resulted in increasing the bookings. So that's another solution that we have access to, and I'll present in the next slide. And finally, after people book, the key and most important metric for destination is the actual visitation. So how can we attribute visitation back to the campaign to ultimately say that Neil saw our campaign and Neil actually ended up visiting the destination after 30 or 60 or whatever number of days. So in a nutshell, this is what we're trying to do end to end in that funnel, measure at every stage, both the change in sentiment and the actions that we were able to influence through our campaign. So moving on to the next slide, and then the theme of measuring the sentiment, we have a solution within StackAdapt, which we call the travel lift. So the travel lift, we break it down into 3 different types of lifts. So measuring the destination favorability, measuring the travel consideration, and measuring the booking intent. And within each one of those, we have a set of KPIs that we can measure. And then we were able to kind of break down this lift by origin markets. Again, a very important insight for the destination, the creatives that were driving most of this lift, and then understanding the demographics and different attributes of the travelers that we actually ran our campaigns to. In terms of how this works, the process is similar to the brand lift, if you're familiar with that. So we do have 2 groups. One is called the exposed group, and this is everyone who was exposed to our campaigns. And then there's the control group. So this is another group of audiences that we create that has exactly the same attributes of the users who saw our campaign, but those users, the only difference is they were not exposed to our campaign. And then by running a survey ad unit to different sets of audiences and asking them a question, and within the options in that question, we have a favorable response, we can measure the lift in the favorable response between the exposed and the control group, and then ultimately attribute that lift to the campaign. So simple example is, do we intend to visit Isle of Man? Yes or no? So we're asking this question to someone who was just exposed to the ad, and we're asking the same question to someone who was not exposed to the ad. So let's say 50% of those who were exposed said yes, and 30% of those who were not exposed said yes. So in that case, we have a 20% lift in destination favorability, for example. And we can do the same thing for each one of those KPIs. In terms of how this survey ad unit will look and what the options are, if you look into the next slide, this is an example of our survey ad unit. So we have multiple options. It can be just a simple multiple choice question. We have different recommendations who can help you with those questions and responses. It could be a drop-down menu, and we can also ask the question through images. So just like examples of how we design those survey ad units. We try to make them unbranded to avoid bias, but there's also an option to have those survey ad units as branded ad units. In addition to this, on the next slide, we have the option to create retargeting pools using the responses of those users. So let's say we run this ad to the exposed pool and someone answers likely or very likely they intend to travel to a certain destination. In that case, those are very high value users that we can target with the campaign to move them down the funnel. Another example, if someone answers very unlikely or unlikely, but we still know that this is a high value traveler, we still know that this is the segment that we're trying to reach, we still know that this is someone who's in market to travel, we can run another type of campaign to kind of convince those users to consider traveling to the destination. So moving on to the next solution, this is the travel impact measurement. So we're moving down the funnel. Now we're looking at the actions of travelers, and we're trying to understand our influence on driving those actions. So the way that works is simple. We have our partner, Adora, and our partner, they have an extensive graph with data from multiple travel brands, including profile data, booking data, hashed emails, and more. And through their graph, they're able to understand the actions of those travelers. So by pixeling or by collecting the pool of users who are exposed to our campaign and then matching this to the graph, we're able to, number one, understand those different travel actions, including the bookings, the searches, the browsing, and two, and also importantly, segment those users and try to understand what are the origin markets of those travelers, what are the traveler profiles, and that way we're not only attributing the success of our campaign to those actions, we're also understanding and providing the brand with insights on where their top travelers are coming from, what are the profiles of those travelers when they make those actions. Moving on to the next slide. So we're moving now down the funnel. People, we managed to convince them. We managed to measure the intent, impact measurement. We're able to attribute those actions back to the campaign. So we identified that travelers ended up booking and they did the searching and they did all the actions. What's very important for the brand and the destination in that case is to ultimately confirm that those travelers ended up visiting the destination. And this is what our destination visitation lift measures. In that solution, through our location data graph, we're able to understand and link back people who are actually present at the destination to the campaigns that we ran. So we're attributing visitation to the campaigns. In addition to that, and you're noticing that this is the same theme, we're understanding and identifying the top origin markets. We're able to understand the user journey in the sense of people who actually visit the destination, what kind of locations that they visited the destination, to provide more insight into the interest of those travelers. For example, retail type of destination, leisure destinations. So we have within our taxonomy different breakdowns that we can also report on in that study. Understanding the timestamp. So the timestamp of when the users were exposed to the campaign and the timestamp of when the users were actually present to the destination. This helps us understand the typical window of travel for a certain destination. And ultimately, because this is a mid-flight, there is the option of mid-flight reporting. We can use those insights to further optimize ongoing campaigns. In the next slide, you'll see an example of our dashboard. So this is an example. Sorry, this is the map of the US, but it's the same concept. So this is an example of where the travelers are coming from for a certain campaign. And within our reporting, we can go further into the cities, understanding which cities are actually generating most visitation to the destination. We're also able to understand the impressions, the clicks, the conversion rates broken down by those users who ended up visiting the destination. And we can provide more cuts, like I mentioned, the origin markets, the profiles of the travelers, and more. But this is just an example of how this will look like. So moving on. Our process for doing this destination visitation reporting is simple. So the first step is collecting the data by understanding the users who are exposed to the campaign. We then match this data to our location graph. We understand where those travelers actually are. And for the ones that are present at the destination, we will do all the cuts and breakdowns of this data to understand their origin markets, to understand the time window, the different metrics that we can report on. And then we deliver this report with the insights to the brand at a certain cadence that we can align on as a team. So I think this is the wrap. So on the next slide, this is just a summary of everything that we've presented. So I think to summarize, there's a huge opportunity for travel. It's even bigger in Europe. It's one of the biggest markets and will be the biggest market this year. So the stakes are very high. The opportunity is really big. There's a lot of trends coming to the market. And in our team at StackAdapt, this is what we focus on. We try to bring all those innovations to our clients. And it's always a constant cycle of innovation. So what we will kind of recommend is be on the top of those travel trends. Look for partners who are able to bring those trends and turn those trends into innovative products and solutions that will help you reach your audiences and achieve your objectives. Leveraging technology, leveraging AI, and leveraging other tools and means to reach the audiences, be it through different channel tactics or different targeting capabilities or creative solutions. Technology is really important, and it can help us more and more reach the travelers at the right time, at the right place, with the right message. And finally, more importantly, also measure the impact of your campaigns in addition to the typical metrics, click-through rates, and conversions. It's important to understand the metrics that drive travel and provide more insight to the success of the campaign, and also additional insights that will help the brand and destinations further optimize their campaigns in the future. And with that, I think we finished our presentation and we can open it up for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yaya and Neil. That was very insightful and full of interesting information. And now we would like to jump into the Q&A portion of the webinar and open up the floor to any questions. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please place them in the questions box of the GoToWebinar panel. I see that there are several questions coming through already, so just a heads up. If you're not able to get to your question today, please don't worry. We will follow up directly with you after the webinar. So the first question is, what are some innovative approaches for creating DOH content that stands out, particularly in high traffic tourist areas?
Shall I get this one? I mean, we spoke a bit about this earlier, actually. I think that the key things to remember is the creative matching the environment and what mindset people are going to be in. And by this, I mean, you know, what time of day, for example, it's going to be. Remember, we thought about rich, bold colors in the day and pastels at night. So those are the sort of things you need to be aware of. But I think the main thing is, remember, there's going to be a lot of people typically that speak different languages. And remember that old sort of, you know, a pitch paints 1,000 words. So use that in your creative sense, you know, try and get that across to as many people in one place. Make it simple, make it bold. Again, I keep talking about our fantastic creative strategy team. They're on hand to help you if you'd like a little bit more help on that, and can advise on sort of what works best as well. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Thank you, Neil. The second question that we got is, what are the most effective KPIs to measure the success of a multi-channel travel campaign, and how we can attribute conversions more accurately across different touch points?
Yeah, I think this one is the part that we touched on in the measurement section. So my advice is, number one, understand the funnel and understand where your campaign is at in that specific funnel. Number two, understand the audiences that we're trying to reach. And then at each stage of the funnel, we have a different set of KPIs. So the set of KPIs will be the traditional digital KPIs, conversion rates, click-through rates, impressions, and then we can go like cost per click, cost per conversion. So those are the typical conversion metrics. I would add to that our ability to measure the sentiment of travelers. So I would throw in the travel lift in the mix wherever that's possible, because that provides a very important insight. And number three is, depending on the stage of the funnel, we might want to understand our impact on driving specific travel actions that are beyond the click-through rates and beyond the typical conversion metrics. So that can be done through, for example, what I presented in the impact measurement reporting or the visitation measurement. Ultimately, we want to have a full view of the impact of our campaign on travelers. And in addition to the KPIs, I think it's important to understand the insights. So stuff like the origin markets of travelers, the demographic breakdown, their interest, their value score. Those are not KPIs per se, but those are insights that will help us improve the campaigns down the line and become more effective and ultimately improving the return on ad spend.
Thank you. And an interesting question that we got from Lulu is that, what is the average brand lift survey response rate for travel?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say that there is no specific average. I can give a range, but just to understand the factors that influence the results, I think it's the audience that we're trying to reach. It's the size of the pool. So in some instances, we have a very large pool, in which case we can optimize for the highest, let's say, click-through rates on the ads and improve the response rate. There are factors like the messaging, the questions that we're asking, the responses that we're offering. and even the success of our campaign, because ultimately if the awareness campaign is successful, is on point, people want to respond to those survey ad units. So it's a very case by case, but I would say it could be anything between 0.5% and 2% in that range of response rate, depending again on all those factors for the campaign.
Thank you, Yaya. And another question that we have is, how should we adjust our budget allocation across various channels to maximize ROI?
Yeah, I can probably answer this one. I spend quite a lot of my day doing this. It's a really hard question to answer as well, because it's one of those it all depends questions. It depends on what part of the funnel you're looking at, what you're looking to target, what your KPIs are, what your budgets are, what your goals, etc., etc. And I'm sure if everybody on this webinar sent me their proposal, I would send me a brief, I'd send back very different proposals for each one of you. So it's quite hard to say about that. One thing I would say that's most important about is, once you've planned your strategy out and you've got it there, be really flexible, optimize it. Every single campaign I work on, whether it's travel or anything else, I'm very fluid with the budgets, where things work, where they don't, uplift, downlift, increase bid factors, decrease bid factors, etc., etc. So there's so many bits around it that you can play with. It's a bit of a hard one to say, how should we adjust it? But have your goals for each channel set out, and don't just rely on looking at that channel in isolation for it. Look at other channels and how they might feed off that as well to help it.
Thank you. And another question that we have is, what insights can you provide on the behavior of the United Kingdom travelers compared to other regions, and how should this influence our ad targeting strategies?
I can take this one. So I think those dimensions will be similar to the dimensions that we spoke about throughout the presentation. So what would be, let's say, the top travel destinations for outbound UK travel? So if we're looking at the UK market, we can think about it in two ways. So what are the travelers that will travel to the UK? So trying to understand the behaviors of those travelers and where they're coming from, and also the travelers who travel from the UK. So linking it back to the same themes that we presented, number one is what would be the top origin markets and the top destinations. So I don't have the specific list, but this is one of the things that I would research as a first step. If I'm running a campaign to have people visit a certain city in the UK, and what would be the top origin markets, and then what would be the typical profiles of travelers that travel in those origin markets, and then what would be the interests of those travelers that would travel. So just understanding, number one, what are the top origin markets for travelers? Number two, what are the typical behaviors and the typical interests of those travelers along all those attributes that we presented? And ultimately, the goal is to create different profiles and segments, and then reach those travelers when they show intent. So I'm sorry I don't have a very specific answer for the UK, but I hope that framework can help in kind of planning and creating those different segments and strategies to identify who those travelers and behaviors are.
Thank you very much. And a very interesting question that we have is, for luxury travel campaigns aimed at high-income travelers, could you elaborate on the most successful creative formats and messages?
Sure. I'm actually doing this for someone at the moment, so it's very, very relevant. I wonder who's asked the question, but there we go. So yeah, what I'm finding at the moment, the ways that we're seeing best performances is carousel and in-banner video ads. They're working really well. They really sort of display what's going on, sort of the experience that you're getting as well in a very sophisticated way. So yeah, that's working really well for us as well. We've also seen CTV work quite well, obviously nice and rich. High income targeted digital out of home as well really works well, geographically targeted ads that way, particularly going through airports. But yeah, so those are the things that work best that I'm seeing at the moment. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Neil. And one last question. Can you recommend mobile engagement strategies to increase booking intent?
Yeah, I can take one. So mobile engagement strategies to increase booking intent. I would say it's identifying the typical, so maybe that's more of an inventory play. I always try to link it back to the travel funnel. So we're trying to target people who are booking. We're trying to reach people at certain types of apps and certain types of applications that we know people will be actually making those decisions on. So through that type of targeted strategy, we can identify when and how people will make that decision, and ultimately mix that with the right targeting tactics and the creatives that are focused on driving those bookings. That would be the way I'll think about this.
Thank you. Amazing. So thank you so much once again, Yaya and Neil. And that concludes today's webinar. And thank you again for joining us, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Arda. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.